am Amy Vetter, and welcome to the Breaking Beliefs podcast. This valuable time is for you to pause in your day and go on your own self-journey. Discover the beliefs that are holding you back from living your best life at work and at home. Learn from the guests on this show as they share their inspirational stories on how they found ways to break internal beliefs that were no longer serving them. Because if you believe you can, you will. And our podcast begins now. Welcome to this episode of Breaking Beliefs, where I interview Brian Fox, the Vice President of Strategic Partnerships at Thomson Reuters and the founder of Confirmation, the trusted global provider of digital confirmations that sold to Thomson Reuters in 2019. He is recognized as the creator of electronic confirmations and holds several patents on electronic audit confirmations. Brian is an industry thought leader and frequent speaker on accounting and fraud issues. He has been named 4 times as one of the top 100 most influential people in accounting. He's a 5-time winner of the accounting profession's top 40 under 40 and was named as Entrepreneur of the Year in Nashville. During this episode, Brian shares his entrepreneurial story from starting Confirmation.com from a life insurance policy from his father's death and working on it in his grandmother's garage to 20 years later creating a global company and catching millions in fraud. This episode is sponsored by Thomson Reuters. Earlier in November, Thomson Reuters held the largest tax and accounting virtual event of the year, with over 5,000 professionals at the annual Synergy Conference. One of the most critical things coming out of this event is how cloud accounting has come front and center for the profession in 2020. Thomson Reuters has published a new white paper answering your questions and addressing common myths. It covers how the cloud technology is applied to audit, tax, and accounting firm management. What does cloud accounting include and not include, and covers language and terminology you are likely to encounter as you determine the cloud-based technology needs of your own firm. Check this white paper out by going to the link in the show notes or on the webpage for this podcast so that you can read further about Thomson Reuters' findings. And now, let's get to my conversation with Brian Fox. Welcome to this episode of Breaking Beliefs. And today I'm with my friend Brian Fox. And Brian, you want to give a little brief introduction on yourself before we get started?
Yeah, sure, Amy. Hi, everybody. I'm Brian Fox. I'm the founder of Confirmation.com and CPA by background. Started my career with Ernst & Young in the Dallas office in audit, and then was with PricewaterhouseCoopers, also in Dallas, on the mergers and acquisitions team, and then went back to business school at Vanderbilt from Nashville, and that's where I started Confirmation.com 20 years ago, and then last summer we were acquired by Thomson Reuters.
Which is awesome. So definitely can't wait to hear that part of your story. So let's start from the beginning though, because it's always good to kind of hear how you began and where you're from, what your parents did, and what kind of influence they had on you as you were growing up.
So, grew up in Nashville. My family's all from here. As I look at my family and
So can't wait to hear your story of Confirmation.com, but would love to start with your background, where you grew up, what your parents did, and kind of how you began your belief systems.
Yeah, thank you. It's a great question. So as I look at my family, I kind of feel like there's a bunch of entrepreneurs, which is really what I kind of felt like I always wanted to do when I was growing up. One of my grandfathers had a construction business that my dad went into, and his brothers. And his mom, my grandmother, I actually had a candy shop that I used to work in the summer called Sarah's Candy. She paid me in chunks of caramel at the end of the day.
Oh, nice. She make the candy, or was
she did? Yeah, she taught the classes and made the candy. And
wow.
I worked the cash register and did the inventory. So then she just cut off a big chunk of caramel at the end of the day, and that was what she paid me with.
Oh,
so,
nice.
And then on my mom's side, my grandfather was in manufacturing, had a manufacturing plant in Nashville and Chattanooga. It was in the war, and as was my other grandfather. And my grandfather passed away before I was born, so I've just heard stories about him. And my grandmother got remarried, but she started a dress shop, and then she and the person I knew as my grandfather, my step grandfather, were in real estate, so I sold that as well. So, between my family members, it's very entrepreneurial. My mom, I take a lot of my background for confirmation.com from what she did. She was actually in the first class of female police officers in Nashville. So there were 6 of them who went through patrol school. She was one of the first 6. And so my brother and I always used to run around the backyard chasing the bad guys, wearing her police uniform with a bobby stick, riding our bikes, chasing the bad guys. And he ended up becoming a police officer. And I always tell our team that what we do is we help the good guys catch the bad guys. So at confirmation.com, that's kind of how I help the good guys catch the bad guys that way. So so that's a little bit of the background. Yeah, and I had an entrepreneurial business. I did the lemonade stands and had a driveway sealing company when I was in college with a friend of mine, and so I always felt like I wanted to do something entrepreneurial when I grew up.
Yeah. So your mom being one of the first officers doing that, what kind of personality or traits did you see in her that something that might have stuck with you?
Yeah, she's not she's kind of small and short, and what was funny is when she came out of college, she went to Vanderbilt for college, and when she graduated, she went right into the police force. And at the time, the bad guys didn't realize that there weren't women on the police force. And so after patrol school, they put my mom, she went into Vice Squad. And so she was actually undercover, and she would go in and buy the drugs and do these kind of things because the criminals didn't realize that she could be a police officer. And she tells us about the stakeouts and going into places with, the team of, the police officers with the shotguns to arrest people. And, she tells some pretty wild stories. But she tells us that, they didn't make women's uniforms. So they gave all the women a large men's shirt, and they had to go and get them made into women's dresses.
Oh my goodness.
So it's just those kind of things. So, you figure out how to make it happen.
Wow. Yeah. I can only imagine your imagination running wild with stories like that.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Did it scare you at all having your mom do that kind of work?
No, she did it for about 6 years or so, and then she went back to law school at night school and became an attorney, and then she ended up working for the Health and Human Services Department, taking abused children away from homes. And so, so I knew about being the police officer. She stopped doing that when my brother was born, or shortly thereafter. But I'd seen pictures of me on her hip in court, those kind of things. But we always had kids that were staying in our house too, who were from abused homes, and that she was trying to help. So, and then she ultimately, because my grandfather and father and uncles were building homes, she became a real estate agent. So that's kind of very got it. You work hard in real estate and construction. It's not it's very cyclical, and my dad never really wanted my brother and I to go into the business because it's
oh really?
Yeah.
Why?
Well, just because it's a tough business, it's very cyclical with the economy, and my parents ended up going bankrupt when I was a sophomore in college.
Oh, really?
And it was because of the downturn in the real estate market. And my dad had like 6 properties that he was building, and the real estate market turned, and there'd been a lot of builders from out of state in Tennessee who'd come in and built huge subdivisions, and then kind of left the keys on the counter, and that negatively impacted the local builders who, were here, and their families were here, and the banks started to call loans. And, it was just a tough time in the real estate market. And this would have been right in the late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, my mom owned maid services that did construction cleanup, and her business went out of business during that time as well, because all the construction loans defaulted and she didn't get paid. Yeah.
Tough time.
Yeah. So it's interesting how we're both affected by that in some way or the other. So did that guide you into your decision of becoming an accountant, or how did you decide? Because it doesn't sound like there were any accountants in your.
No, there were no accounts. No, what happened was I knew that I wanted to own my own business at some point. So I would go around and interview business owners and ask them about their business and those kind of things. But one of the questions I always asked them was, what would you have done differently? And almost universally, the different business owners said that they would have taken more accounting courses in college because that would have helped them, right? So I always look at it, I think accounting is the foreign language of business. And so at that point, even though I honestly didn't really enjoy accounting, I was going to be a finance major like the rest of my friends. I was at SMU in Dallas. And I figured, well, I'll go ahead and I'm one of those guys, I'll go ahead and eat the peas on my plate so I can enjoy the rest of the meal. So I took all these accounting classes to knock them out and realized I was closer to an accounting degree than a finance degree. And I thought, well, that'll actually set me apart if I get an accounting degree. It'll give me a little something different to set me apart from all my finance major friends. And so I ended up pursuing an accounting degree, which was harder than the finance degree. And then, I asked people, I said, what do you do with an accounting degree? They said, well, go work for a big six firm, get all the experience that you can. And so I did that. That's when I looked. And it was fortunate. It came down for me between Ernst & Young and Arthur Andersen. And I liked people at both firms, but I had some friends from SMU who were Andersen, and I guess it's fortuitous that I didn't end up there because unfortunately now everybody, all the students coming out of schools these days think that Andersen was a bad firm, when in fact they were the best firm.
Oh yeah, everyone wanted to work there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I had a friend who was there, and he was a year older, and he said, look, they just beat the bejesus out of you. And if you can make it through the gauntlet, then, you get to wear the green jacket and
right.
Go back to the back room cigar room. But I was like, my intent is to be an entrepreneur. I don't intend to become a partner in an accounting firm. I want to enjoy the people I work with in my daily job. And so there are people at Ernst & Young that I knew from SMU, loved the job, and loved what they were doing, loved people. And so I went over there for 2 years and did. I loved the people I worked with. And so it was a lot more fun. And then I guess fortuitously, Andersen I've talked to a lot of professors, and one of the things they always tell me, which also kind of creates the image, is when they're doing case studies, they always use the Andersen case studies because they're trying to get their students hired by the other firms. So right. They don't want to have case studies that make the current firms upset or look bad. And so all the professors really use all the Andersen case studies to make them look bad because they're not looking to hire anybody. So right. The students get a really bad image of Andersen, even though they truly were the biggest investor at the time. So
yeah.
It's fortunate for me, that I went with Ernst & Young.
Yeah. Well, and it's so interesting how similar our back, because I did the same exact thing. My mom would take me so because she had a maid service and served the construction industry, she was in the Property Management Association, or I think that's what it was called. So I would go with her to those events and meet all these other like property managers and builders and so forth. And I would always ask them the same question of, what degree would you get? And they always said accounting.
Yeah.
And it's funny, now I talk about that and say, there's something wrong with that, right? If that means they're not getting the help from their accountant that they should have, if they feel like they need to know it themselves, right?
Well, it truly is. It really is a foreign language, right?
Yeah.
Debits and credits and T accounts and all these crazy accruals and estimates. And so if you understand it, can read a foreign language, it can read the financial statements and read your own financial statements, the health of a business, right? And if you don't know how to read that foreign language of business, the numbers, then you're reliant on an interpreter, and your interpretation is only as good as they are, or as good as they want to tell you. And in some cases, that's when some of the frauds happen. So,
exactly.
If you want to understand business, you need to understand the numbers.
Well, and it kind of brings together both your sides, right? The catching fraud, the bad guys.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you started an audit, and I'm assuming didn't love it.
I can't say I really enjoyed audit.
Yeah.
Actually, the first year, I was happy to do whatever they told me to do for the most part. Staple, copy, fax, go to the supply closet and find a box of tick marks. We all look for the box of tick marks for half an hour until somebody tells you there's really no box. You just create your own tick marks.
Right.
Or somebody tells you to go look for the GSR, which was the green squiggly ruler.
Yeah.
They play the fun games on the staff. So first year, and in all honesty, I was a little frustrated because I was like, this job is really mind-numbingly boring,
Yes.
right? I mean, I was licking stamps, stuffing envelopes, chasing
Yeah.
paper with confirmations, bringing the supplies to the office. We went around like the printer which is fine, right? Everybody's got to do the grunt work. And my grandmother, the one who started the dress shop, would always tell me, she'd say, Brian, as long as they're paying your paycheck, you show up with a smile on your face and you work harder than the boy or the girl with you next to you. That's what I did. And in all honesty, what happened was that, I did that for 2 years. And I watched Ernst & Young go through moving from paper to electronic work papers, with the exception of confirmations and a few other things. And that was really where I came up with the idea. But the second year, I was supposed to, felt like I was going to learn some new stuff on the liability side of the balance sheet. And, our largest client, Trimble Crow, my largest client, we were short staffed. And so the intern got pulled and staff one got pulled, and I was stuck with confirms again. And I was like, oh my God, this is terrible. And my senior, who's a great guy, made partner at Ernst & Young. He said, look, you're the low-cost employee. You got to do this. And so I did it, and I wasn't real happy about it. And at the end, Sal Beer was his name. He said, Brian, your attitude wasn't as good this year. I said, I know, Sal, but I was a lot more efficient. And, 2 years in, I sat there and I said, I can't believe that Ernst & Young's paid me this much to, fold paper, stuff envelopes, lick stamps.
More than once, too.
Yeah, no, and I got good. Like
second time.
You could typically fold about 5 to 6 pieces of paper, and the crease was still good. If you folded more than that, right,
it got too bulky.
Yeah, and you could stuff and use the little thing with the water in it. So, I got really efficient, and I thought I was about 2 years out of college, and really all I'm doing is adding up columns and numbers and stuff and envelopes and chasing paper, and I can't believe that somebody hadn't fixed this yet. And so I was very frustrated with the process. And that's when I was like, somebody not only can create a more efficient process, but as I sat there and did it my second year and understood what I was doing, I said, I know how I would circumvent the process to commit financial fraud. I would suspect that some fraudsters intent to commit fraud have already circumvented the auditor's processes. And then I did my research and found that to be the case. But I said, I could commit fraud on Ernst & Young. I ended up going over to PwC, got out of audit, went to mergers and acquisitions. We got pulled on to some audits while I was there. The M&A side was really fun. Enjoyed that. Whole different world. They treat you a lot nicer in the M&A space.
Yeah, because you're not the auditor.
That's right. They put you in the glass fish bowl, and the CEO greets you at the door. But did some audits, but saw they had the same issues. And said if I could circumvent both Ernst & Young and PwC's audit confirmation procedures to commit financial fraud, it looks like a problem with really the way they're being done in the profession. And that was really the brainchild of confirmation.com.
Yeah, which is, I remember thinking that about confirmations, that it was just such a waste of time. And it was I couldn't believe what they were paying to have us sit there and do it. And I think, I talked to a group of accounting students a couple of weeks ago, and I had to talk them through, your first jobs are going to be horrible, and you don't give up on accounting. You just have to go through it. And then, but that's what gets you the base foundation to, and if you look at this, it's unless you're in that industry, you wouldn't know there was a business opportunity doing that, right? You had to have done that work to find the business opportunity.
Yeah, you don't even know they exist. I mean, I forgot all the stuff on the CPA exam about tax, and tax people don't even realize confirmations exist anymore, right? No. So you had to do it to
and even when they explain it in school, until you do it, you're like, yeah.
and most people assume that, well, shoot, the accounting profession's been around for 100 years. These people are all been in the profession 20, 30 years. They're a heck of a lot smarter than I am. I hadn't even passed the CPA exam at that point. And I'm like, I think I could commit fraud on these guys. But I'll do what they tell me to do. And that was really where I said, I think there's a real opportunity here to help our profession, which I think is a very honorable, admirable profession, and it's important what we do.
Right.
But I said, I think people are pulling the wool over our eyes, and we could do better. Especially when I said, at the time it was, I started with Ernst & Young in 96. I finished with PwC in 99, went back to graduate school and wrote the business plan that year in 99. And so the internet was 3 years old at that point, basically. So I was saying, hey, we could use this new technology called the internet to create a secure clearinghouse, make the process more efficient, near real time from a 4, 6, or 8 week process, but also really eliminate or reduce the opportunity for financial fraud to occur, and help protect investors and the public who are counting on us. So yeah, that was. Unfortunately for me, my professor in graduate school had been an accountant, and he was like, "You want to go do that," and encouraged me to kind of pursue it. So
That's amazing.
yeah.
I, between confirmations and when you get out of school and audit, where you have to ask the controller whether they committed fraud.
Yeah. Give me one fraudster that's going to go, oh my gosh, this first year,
Right,
out of college is going to say, yes, I did it. Arrest me. I mean, come on. It's just silly. We're playing games.
Yeah, and it's to a first year auditor or second year. Like, I have no idea what to look for or ask about.
Oh yeah. Well, and these fraudsters, they're gregarious, they're smart.
Yeah.
In the frauds that I talk about are not somebody stealing $100 out of petty cash. I'm talking about like when the CEO and the CFO and the COO get together and they defraud the investors and the banks that lend money, and they're stealing millions or billions, and they're sophisticated actors. This is not, and so they're good actors.
Yes.
Now the fraud may not be very sophisticated, but the people are sophisticated. So they're going to scare the heck out of a first year staff auditor or an intern.
Oh, for sure. But even, I've been at small clients where it's, the book, like to your point earlier, the business owner not understanding how to track internal controls or financials, and, they're just regenerating petty cash.
Yeah.
And taking, a lot of money out of the company. And, it's, to your point, like having the technology or experts around that in your business, like you're an expert in what you do, but you do have to pay for the right expertise to catch the bad guys. And you don't want to think you have bad guys, but it's possible. Yeah.
No, that's for sure.
Yeah. So, okay. So you wrote this business plan, but you don't have a technology background.
No, I can't read a line of code. And at the time I had no money either. And so when my professor told me that I ought to start the business, I was actually interviewing with other .com startups to go be an intern there between my first and second year of business school. And my father was killed in an accident, a hiking accident.
Oh, wow.
And so my mom and brother and I, we used my dad's life insurance policy as the seed capital for the business.
Oh.
So that was the only way I had the initial capital to start the business. And you really couldn't have started a business at a worse time. I know people talk about now with COVID and the economy, but I would tell you that it was at least as bad, if not worse, when I started my business, because you had the .com bust. And then I graduated in May of 2001. So I hit the ground running to try and really get the business off the ground. And then 9/11 happened. And so the entire global economy shut down at that point, and we didn't know whether there was a global war getting ready to happen. And so we moved the business into my grandmother's garage. I had 3 other folks who kind of joined me to start the business, and I paid them in stock. And for 2 years, nobody took salaries. And I had $92,000 of student loan debt from business school at Vandy that I kept deferring and running up the interest rates as long as they'd let me. And fortunately, we had good things happen in the business. I was taking truly $500, $1,000, $5,000 from every aunt, uncle, cousin, high school friend, college roommate, parents of friends, whoever would feel sorry enough to give me some money to help me keep the business going. We did that for about 2 years. Never had more than 30 or 45 days worth of cash. Very stressful time. And fortunately, at the end of that 2-year period, the market opened up, and we were able to raise our first real round of outside funding that gave us about 12 months worth of capital. And it was a crazy, exciting time, but very stressful. And family life happens at the same time. So my wife and I had our first child the week before. We both went back to graduate school at Vandy. We had our first daughter the week before business school started, and she was getting her master's in early childhood special education. My wife Megan. We found out we were expecting our second child the week we were graduating. And then the summer, right, just about a month later, we ended up adopting her half brother, who was 14. So here I was, the 26-year-old CEO of a .com business, right in the internet bust. 9/11 happened. We have a 1.5-year-old, one due in December, and we've adopted a 14-year-old. And we've got no revenue and barely any money to fund the business. So it was a crazy time.
All right. So you're going to have to explain the decision making that happened during this time. So
yeah,
first off, what gave you the confidence or wherewithal that this was the right thing to do with all that going on?
Well, I knew the business was needed in our profession. I validated that with other people, but I believed that we needed it. I mean, I also had enough people who were older who said that this is a waste of time and cash is important. I mean, the very first article was written on us in the Tennessean, the Nashville newspaper, front page of the business section, the ex-managing partner of KPMG said that auditing cash is really one of the critical areas, and this was pretty much a useless service. And I was like, thanks for the help. I have 3 total years of public accounting. He was the managing partner of the KPMG office, and clearly he knows a lot more than I do. But I was like, I really think I could commit fraud on you guys, and it's inefficient. People hate doing it. So I think there's an opportunity to use the internet here. So I just had to put my head down and go into the headwinds there. But, I do. When I talk to entrepreneurship classes, I always tell them that it was too hard. It truly was too hard. If it had been my own money, after 9/11 happened, I probably would have quit, and as people recommended, gone and gotten a real job again, gone back to work for one of the firms or done something different. But when I've taken my dad's life insurance policy that was from my mom and brother and I, and then when I've taken investment from my grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, friends, high school friends, their parents, I knew I couldn't walk away from the business because it got hard. My grandparents were in the real estate business, and they would talk about how sometimes they'd be laying in buildings, jumping up leases for restaurants. And sometimes early on, the restaurateur would just leave the keys on the counter, proverbial keys on the counter, and leave. And so they ended up saying, no, we want that person. They always made that person invest in the land and building so that they had a vested interest and wouldn't leave the keys on the counter and leave, with payments. And so same thing. If it was my own money, honest to God, it was too hard. It was too hard to go through from family and business, and I would have quit, but I owed people money. And so I told people and my wife and myself, I said, I've got to see this business to either 100% success or 100% failure. Quitting is not an option. Because I'm already in this, I already spent their money, right? I got to either be able to look them in the eye and say, I gave it everything I had, and it just didn't work. And the timing was bad because, we all knew that the internet bubble was going to pop, right? We kind of expected it. You just didn't know when, but nobody expected 9/11. So, I couldn't be blamed for either one of those. And it would have been easy to say I had a good idea, just the wrong timing. But since I'd taken other people's money, I felt I owed them everything I had. And I was going to pay them back one way or the other, even if the business did fail. And I knew exactly how much I owed them. And so I figured I better make this business work so I can pay them back. So that was really the decision. And I remember, there were times where on a Friday, I remember we had to pay our health insurance. We didn't pay anybody, but I always paid 100% of health insurance. And on a Friday, I went over to CarMax because they were advertising at that time. They'd buy your car. You didn't have to buy one of theirs. And I had a Honda Accord from college. And it was going to give us about 45 days worth of cash, at least 30 days. And my wife was like, well, what are you doing? She's like, it's only 30 days worth of cash. I was like, I know, but it's 30 days worth of cash. Some other good things can happen in that time frame. And I was going to have to sell it on Monday. And we opened the mail at the office, and an investor who had been pitching sent us a check, a little note that said, hey, I decided to invest. So I didn't have to sell my car. So things like that happen all along. And as an entrepreneur, you're always grasping onto the wins. And as you look back, you realize how close to failure you really teetered so often. And we're holding on to pretty thin straws. But when you're the entrepreneur trying to make good things happen, those small wins, those big wins, really put wind in your sails and give you the encouragement to keep going.
Yeah. So, okay. You took money from your mom, your brother. Is that what you said?
Yeah, that was the
And then you were in your grandmother's garage, and none of them had been accountants or understand what confirmations are.
No. And
how did they think this was a good idea?
A good idea? For anybody who's an entrepreneur, Um, I always tell people that anybody who invested in your business to start with, um, they're investing in who you are. They're not investing in the business. Most of the time, they don't know what the business does. In many cases, they're counting on you. And so that was really what happened with me. My grandmother, who we always kind of jokingly said was the chairman of the board, she'd always say, "Hey, you guys, it's tax season. You guys must be really busy." And we'd laugh and we'd say, "Well, Patty, we are very busy. It's because it's first quarter. We call it busy season, but it has nothing to do with taxes. We're an audit." So she didn't know what we did, but that was the entrepreneur in that family encouragement. And that's a lot of pressure. But those are the only people who are really going to invest in you until you get the business off the ground and then convince those angel investors who are arm's length to really invest in your business. I think that.
Well, and they were already risk takers themselves. It seems like I don't know about your brother, but as far as your mom and your grandmother, sounds like they took a lot of risk to accomplish what they wanted.
Yeah, for sure. My grandmother always, I heard stories about her and her dress shop and how she'd have to go to people's houses. She'd do it on credit. She'd have to go knock on people's doors to try and collect her bills and do those kind of things. So I always heard some of those stories. She had a bumper sticker that we thought was funny. It said, "Happiness is a positive cash flow." As an accountant, we get that, right? As an entrepreneur, entrepreneur professors always told me that cash is king. It doesn't matter what your income statement says. Cash is king. So
yes.
Yeah.
So how do you think as far as that background in your family of really taking risks, that like on your worst of days, how did that help?
It's probably the opposite side to the CPA, right? I'm a CPA, which most people think is pretty conservative, but at the same time, I'm an entrepreneur and a risk taker. And so, any entrepreneur has to be comfortable with uncertainty and taking a lot of risk and operating in that environment of the unknown, right? You're never going to have the perfect timing. There's never going to have clarity on all the inputs that you need to make decisions. You're going to have to go with gut. You're going to have to go with instinct. You're going to have to go with just 40% of the data or 60 or 70% of the data. You've got to make decisions. You got to move quickly. You got to see your business through. You can't get, all into, analyzing data and trying to get the best data. You've really just got to go out there and run your business and try and grow as quickly as you can because you only have a limited time frame. It depends on how much cash you have in the bank.
Yes. No, so true. So you got this money from this investor that took you 12 months, that gave you 12 months. Sounds like that was a turning point for you.
Yeah, what we did, we went out and raised a round of funding. So we had a lead investor in Nashville who said he would lead the round, which is important. You always need that lead investor. We had a whole bunch of others who said they would follow on. And so we did. We raised, it was a $750,000 debt round with warrants attached. We increased that to $1.15 million, so an extra $400,000. So that really gave us about a year's worth of capital. And that was the longest, time that we had to operate without having to raise money again, right? Everything else is in 30-day increments, which is tough for a 2-year period. But that gave us the ability to actually do some planning, some long-range planning and things. And so we, as a business, we continue to grow. We'd outsource the technology development. You have to be really creative as an entrepreneur, solve problems and do it quickly. So we had a group that was building our application. They weren't a dev shop. They were just another business that had spare resources at the time. So we utilized them, and the gentleman served as our interim CTO. And as our business grew, their business grew. And about 2 years, about a year later, so about 2 years in, they needed their resources back, and we needed more. And it was a perfect time to raise another round of funding. So we raised a $3 million preferred A round of funding. And that allowed us to internalize the technology team, to bring on a CTO and the first internal developers. And then it gave us about 18, 24 months worth of capital. And so we internalized the application, kind of rewrote it. It was originally written in Full Fusion. We rewrote it in .NET. And then continued to have success in the market. We were growing. We had, our first bank was Pinnacle Bank here in Nashville, first accounting firm for Grandis and Wisnick. And because we had a network model, and that grew from Nashville to Middle Tennessee to Tennessee, Mississippi, and Alabama, Southeast, the U.S., and then even outside the U.S. borders. And so it was fun to see that happening. And we ended up raising a $5.25 million round of funding for just pure growth capital. That was going to give us a 3-year timeline. We raised that in 2006 with the timeline to hit cash flow positive in 2009. And fortunately, we stayed very true to our mission and what we were trying to accomplish. We had a lot of customers at that time who were saying, hey, can you build this? Can you make it do this? Can you add this service? And we said, we will when we get to cash flow positive. And we hit cash flow positive.
What was your mission that you held true to?
Just staying true to bank confirmations. So we were going to be we were going to own the bank confirmation market. And so we didn't necessarily jump into receivables or payables or legal rep letters or all these other things. I had the patent on legal rep letters, but we didn't go build it. We had banks asking us to do things like credit inquiries and reverse mortgage verifications and all these other things that they confirm for non-CPAs. And we said, look, we'll get to that, but we want to hit cash flow positive first. And that was fortunate for us.
That is a really important lesson, because I think being an entrepreneur, sometimes I compare it to gambling, because it's like, oh, we'll hit tomorrow, or like getting that check, like you said, like that surprise. But so many different opportunities come your way, and you're like, oh, well, that could be cool.
Oh, we could do that. Yeah. And you're an optimist as an entrepreneur. Yeah. You're like, I can do anything. That glass is not half empty. It's always half full. But you had to be very disciplined to say, we're going to do our business plan. We're going to get to cash flow positive, because for us, what happened, we hit cash flow positive in 2009. And again, the real estate market crashed, and we had another downturn in the economy, and we were cash flow positive. And so a lot of my entrepreneurial friends were having to take 50% haircuts on their previous valuations to stay in business to raise money. It became a buyer's market, not a seller's market. Mm-hmm. And, fortunately, we had the ability to say, no, thank you. We'll just cash flow ourselves and grow with our own cash. And so we actually paid dividends for the next couple of years and invested in our business and grew it organically ourselves with our own cash flow, and never had to raise another dollar again after that. So it was a nice place to be, the ability to say no. But
how did you learn that? Like, where was that from you? That was from business school? Was that something watching your grandparents? Or
my business mentor, Chris Shellhorn. Because I brought Chris in. He was one of the four of us in the garage. He was our chairman and CEO. I had the idea and the passion and kind of the youth. And Chris had the wisdom and the experience. And he had the banking side compared to my accounting side. He'd been the CEO of a company called Visa Interactive, which was the Visa, the credit card company. He ran everything they did online and worldwide. And then Visa sold that to a company called Integrion, which was really the first online banking platform. And he ended up becoming the CEO of that business. It was owned by the largest 18 banks in North America, IBM and Visa. And that was an interesting story. The banks had a shared utility for online banking, because they didn't know if this internet thing was for real. And then when they realized it was, they all wanted to run it themselves. And so he spun the technology back to the banks individually to run it, sold off a bill payment piece to a company out of Atlanta called Check Free. And he was consulting at the time when I talked to him. My attorney had also been his attorney at Visa and then at Integrion. So that was how we got connected. And I always say, I think Chris felt sorry for me. Like, here's this young 26-year-old kid who's, in over his head, has no idea about business and what he's doing. And, but he's got a pretty good idea. And we hit it off. And, Chris, he's my youngest daughter's godfather. I go on vacation with his sons. He kind of always says that I'm not old enough to be one of his brothers or young enough to be one of his sons, but I'm right in the middle. But he's been my business mentor, probably the most influential person for my business career and family career as well. After my father passed away, Chris was a significant influence on me and helping me become a father and a husband and do those things well also. So finding a mentor was huge.
And so he was basically saying, stay the course.
He said, let's make sure that we get the cash flow positive. We're going to stay true to this, and then we can kind of take our head out of the sand and look around. But let's not spread ourselves too thin. And so that was wisdom.
Probably.
Yeah. I mean, Yeah, absolutely. Because you, as an entrepreneur, you're like, whatever I can do, we'll do that to make a little bit more money. And that was the wisdom and experience that he was teaching me. And I'm fortunately in a spot now when I'm able to mentor other entrepreneurs and help them stay focused on a mission to get to a point where they can have a choice instead of being forced to make certain decisions because they have to. But that means, don't spread yourself too thin. Sometimes it's better not to have the big customer too early because they can then dominate your product development cycle. And you kind of feel obligated because they're paying you so much, but yet it's not going to be a lot of those components and function and feature aren't things that you're going to be able to really sell to others. So you end up kind of looking like a customized shop a little bit, and that kind of gets you off course a little bit. You have to course correct. So, along those ways, I've learned a lot in the last 20 years for
sure. So once you got to cash flow positive, how did you determine priorities as far as what other directions you went with the business?
We looked at what was most closely tangential to us, what we knew best. And so that was when we kind of moved into things like receivable confirmations and some of those kind of things. And we did have some banks who said, hey, some banks said, we're not going to use your confirmation service until you build a commercial credit inquiry service. And fortunately, we said, well, we're going to hold off on building that right now. And we put them on a list of future potential. And then we had a top 10 bank in the U.S., Citizens Bank, said, we're not coming on until you build it. And at that point, we had about 20 banks who had said they would come on if we built commercial credit inquiries, and Citizens Bank was a top 10. So you kind of add that, and all of a sudden, by building it, you could get all of those 20 so banks on both platforms. Well, that gave you enough critical mass for commercial credit inquiries to make it legitimate, and at the same time justified building it so that you could get them on your confirmation.com platform. So that was really when we branched out to commercial credit inquiry, something that auditors and accountants really had nothing to do with, but yet allowed us to go out and those people in our sales team selling to banks had then two services to sell to the banks. And so it was an easier value proposition to a lot of those banks.
Okay.
So we sold kind of receivable confirmations and paper confirmations along with bank confirmations to the accounting firms. And so that kind of expanded the breadth of what we're selling. And then we had commercial credit inquiries on the bank side. So that expanded that. And then ultimately we ended up acquiring a few businesses, a company called Legal Confirm, a friend of mine now, Peyton Barron. He had started that really as an entrepreneur out of his parents' house. And he was working as an accountant for a great accounting firm. And I kind of said, here's a kid with passion, enthusiasm, and he's working hard nights and weekends. Like, we need him on our team. And so we acquired his business, and he's been running legal confirmations for us for a while now, and been doing a great job with that. And we've got over 6,000 law firms globally that now use that service. So it's been fun. And then we acquired some businesses to get into some of the markets overseas. Our first acquisition was in London. That was we really established our European footprint. We bought a business over in India. So we bought several businesses along the way or opened them up de novo in order to expand our footprint.
Yeah, so interesting. Love hearing these stories. So what do you think is anything that shifted as you became, so, there's one thing to be an entrepreneur, startup, crazy, creative, exciting, ups and downs. But then once you start getting into critical mass and you're a leader,
it's very different.
Shifted for you? What went well? What didn't go well? Like what's something that you have had to learn in that process?
Yeah, I was talking to an entrepreneur that I'm kind of mentoring yesterday when we had lunch, and I was sharing with him. I said, growing a business there's stages, and it's kind of like raising children. So when your business is young and when your children are young, you make all the decisions, right? You tell your kids when they're going to eat, you tell them what they're going to eat, what they're going to do, and you plan out the whole schedule. So you're really doing it all. And as an entrepreneur, when we were in my grandmother's garage, and there was the four of us were doing it all. We did everything, from product development to working with the technology team to sales to accounting. We did it all. You knew the whole business. We answered the customer support phone. You did it all. I emptied the toilets, right? It wasn't like somebody was coming in and cleaning the toilets, right? If the computer broke, we had to take it over to Office Depot to get the thing fixed, right? We emptied the trash. You do it all. Right. And as your business grows, just like your children, you need to allow it to grow. And so you bring in some people who early on are kind of the Swiss Army knives, because you need people who can do a lot of different things. And as an entrepreneur, it was nice in those cases to be able to bring people on to do the things I didn't like to do. Like brought on a controller, really an outside bookkeeper to do all the accounting. That was nice. So I could focus on doing other things like product and sales and running the business. And so, you have that stage where you're still involved, but you've got a bunch of people who are kind of the Swiss Army knives, and everybody's still doing almost everything, but there's some specialization. And then, your children are that way, right? You're letting them make some decisions, but you're right there. It's kind of like, when your kids are 15 and they're learning how to drive a car. You're right in the car, but you're coaching them. But, if they're getting ready to go into the other lane and hit a car, you can reach over and grab that steering wheel and yank them back in time to save the car and the business, right? Same thing. But then as the business continued to grow, and we ended up with 15 offices globally, you want to put people in the right positions for success, but you also need to bring in the right people from the outside to help grow the business and who have been there and done it before. So you need professional specialization. So you need people who are deep in their silos, but have managed teams, right? I mean, you talk about the fact that some of the best coaches in sports weren't the best athletes, and some of the best salespeople aren't always your best sales managers, and whatever the case may be. And we found that to be true. We want to give people an opportunity to grow into spots, but in some cases that's not what they're the best at, right? Is managing people. And so, we ended up putting people in the right positions, and also complementing our executive management team with talented folks who have been there and done it before to get us to that next level. And in there, really what you're doing as the entrepreneur, or as the person running the business, is you're trying to give them the resources that they need, the tools and resources that they need to be successful, because now they're better at doing their job than you are, right? They're better at the technology, they're better at the sales, they're better at the marketing, they're better at the customer support and running those organizations than you ever were. So, again, your kids always, they'll get to a point where they're smarter than you too. Yeah. And, then at that point, you're just kind of their mentor and coach. And so when you get to that point in the business, it's different. It's still a lot of fun. I miss going on sales calls. I love going on sales calls. But at that point, you're making sure that your executive team has got the resources they need, and the direction, the strategic direction, the big level, long range thinking and planning is a lot of what you're doing. And then you really expect them to kind of operate and execute on the day to day. And really what happens is you expect them to solve their team's 80% of their problems, and then the 20% rolls up to you. And so if they're doing that with their team, their team's solving 80% of the problems on their own, they come to the management team with the 20% that's tough. Your management team solves 80% of those internally. It brings you the 20% that they need help with, and then there's a lot of times not necessarily the right answer. It's tough choices either way. And so those are the things you do. I always tell people, people ask me what would you do different. I think I've taken some more HR classes, because ultimately it's about people. You end up dealing with people, and coaching, mentoring, working with people, and not as much in the individual functionalities of the different parts of the business. So it changed from the garage all the way to when we had a global business with 15 offices 19 years later. And it was a really fun transition all the way through. Stressful, tough, wasn't always easy, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But, very worthwhile.
Is there in those three stages, what do you think was your favorite, and what were you best at? Might be two different answers, but
yeah, I don't really know. They all had their positives and negatives, right? Early on, it's fun, it's exciting, everybody's doing everything, but you're probably the closest to failure at that point in time, and so it's very, very stressful. And as you get older, the business risk maybe goes down some, but the more people you have, the more HR issues, the more policies, procedures, and those kind of things. So you're not as stressed there, but you are more stressed on some of those HR issues. And you kind of feel like a lot of times you're refereeing or, deciding between, who's going to get the resources or making decisions. And so, it's all fun, but it's also all stressful in its own way. I don't know which part I'm best at. I think I enjoy the creativity. I don't mind the risk. And so I love helping entrepreneurs today kind of get off the ground and put their business together and get to a point where their business is self-sustaining.
Right. Yeah. Awesome. So, any story you want to share? Because I know you have a ton of them from your business, but that's one of your favorite stories that might be a great story, but also was like, wow, what we created really helped the world as well.
Yeah, I would certainly say the ability to help the good guys catch the bad guys. Every time we caught a financial fraud, that was huge. I mean, we'd run around the office, and a lot of times we couldn't tell people about it because we're under non-disclosures and confidentiality agreements. And so a lot of times, a lot of the frauds, like the Peregrine Financial Group fraud or the Shepherd Major Play Fund fraud or some of the others that we caught, that was because those companies and clients kind of announced it and became public knowledge. And so that was very rewarding, right? And I always say if what we had done was just to create efficiency, that would have been kind of boring. But the fact that I truly felt that we were helping good guys catch bad guys, right? Russell Wasendorf, BFG, stole over $200 million in 20 years. He'd have stolen another $100 million, but he's in jail for the rest of his life now, right? We stopped him from pillaging and taking advantage of people. And so to me, that was a mission. We were mission driven in that. And it was just very rewarding to be able to do that. But I think personally in the business, probably to me, one of the most special things, we built an incredible team, an incredible executive team that was they were hitting on all cylinders. It wasn't like everybody got along at all points in time. Sometimes we felt like we were refereeing, but we built a great team. But one of the coolest things is that the four of us that were in my grandmother's garage, Jeanette Hauser, who was my first employee, Chris Shellhorn, who was my business mentor, and then Dave Malone, who was our first sales guy. The four of us that were in my grandmother's garage, we were there in the garage, and we were there the day we sold it to Thomson. And you don't see that in the business where the four people who were there in the garage
usually have a missing beetle.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So for me, that was awfully special to be able to kind of go from start to finish with the same four people. And that was probably the neatest part of it.
That's very cool. So I like to end with some rapid fire questions. So you pick a category.
All right.
So family and friends, money, spiritual, or health.
I'll go family and friends.
Okay. Things or actions that I don't have that I want.
More experiences. I'm big on risk taking, and I like experiences. And so I always make my kids do crazy things. And I think I used to travel with my grandparents a lot, and much better than Christmas presents or birthday presents were the experiences and the trips that they took me on. So to me, more experiences with family and friends.
Things or actions that I do have that I want.
I've got kids that are pretty good at risk taking. So I get them pretty much all certified to scuba dive at the age of 10.
Oh, wow.
My middle daughter, she held off for a couple of years, but cool story about her. You don't see this often, but she on the same day, she did her first scuba dive and her first skydive at the age of 12.
Oh my goodness.
So she went tandem. She jumped out of the plane at the age of 12. So she did her first scuba dive and skydive. She was definitely exhausted from all the adrenaline rush that day. But I take them all when they're 15, before they turn 16. I take them all to climb Kilimanjaro in Africa.
Oh my gosh!
They're pretty adventuresome spirits. My oldest daughter is working on her rescue diver for scuba diving, and so they're all pretty good at least putting up with me.
Yeah, no, that's fun. Things or actions I don't have that I don't want.
Bad health.
Yeah.
I think as I look at that, what would be the most limiting to me would be bad health and not have the ability to go out and do these kind of things.
Yeah.
And to enjoy those experiences with my family. So that's one of the things I guess I'm guarding against.
Yes, exactly.
Trying to ward off bad health
as much as possible.
Habits. Yeah.
And then last question, things or actions that I do have that I don't want.
Getting older. I have to get older, and I don't want to. So, as you get older, you just got to fight it,
Yeah.
I do everything I can to fight it, and get into new and different things. Always challenge myself. I don't play golf. I kids. We have 4 of our own plus 1 that we adopted, and had too many kids plus a business to run to be good at golf. And so my wife always wanted to do kind of crazy fun adventures. And so when our one that we adopted, when he turned 18, I started doing crazy things with him, like taking skydiving and those kind of things. But we've gone to professional bull riding school, wrestled alligators, climbed mountains. So we do a lot of wild and crazy things. So I always try and keep it interesting.
Yeah.
So if I can ward off and always do something a lot of times that scares me, it's some sort of an athletic event I got to train for. Because as you get older, it's, when the floor's a little cold and it's a little cold outside, it's easy to stay in bed and not get up and exercise, or it's easy to eat that extra cookie during the holidays, right? But if I've got something that I know I'm going to be embarrassed about if I don't do it, some race or something I'm training for, then that at least helps keep me semi-motivated to keep eating better, decent, and exercising right. So try and ward off that aging process.
Love it. Love it. So anything before we close out that you want to make sure that we haven't covered, or something that you want to make sure people learn from this conversation?
Yeah, I would say, if you're passionate about something, go do it. There's never a right time for a lot of things. There's never a right time to start a business. There's never a right time to get married. There's never a right time to have kids. If you wait till the perfect time, you're going to miss the opportunity. And so that's one of the things that I think my grandparents taught me. That the other thing my grandfather taught me, who he enlisted in the Army during World War II as a private, and finished his career in the military as a one-star general. And he always said, volunteer for everything that comes your way. And you never know where that's going to lead you. And he said some of the best opportunities he had happened because he volunteered for different things that other people didn't want to do. And for me, that's kind of been true in my life too. And whether it was picking auditing and volunteering. I mean, when I was at Ernst & Young, one of the reasons I got frustrated in general was my entire start class of 42 people, we all got promoted to senior, and 5 of us got an extra $1,000, right? And there was 4 of us that had passed the CPA exam the first go around. And, you all know those people who play the games, right? Who hide out on Thursday and Friday afternoons because they don't want the weekend work. And, if you go volunteer, you pick up extra work. But I would say go do those kind of things because it helps for your career. So volunteer, get involved, and take risks, and be willing to kind of put it out there. And never give up. My entrepreneurship professor always ended every email with
never give up.
Never give up.
Love that. Yeah. And it's so true. Is like, people wait forever, plan, and just don't go after it and just do it. Right.
Yeah.
Like, and so, having that risk streak, but also know where your boundaries are is helpful as well.
Yeah, for sure.
So, well, thank you so much for sharing your story. This has been great.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Amy. Thanks, everybody. This has been a lot of fun.
And now for our mindful moments of this interview that I had with Brian that I thought was so inspirational, and so many great tips from an entrepreneur that's been there and done that. And just going back to really a few points in this conversation that really struck for me is, one, his mom being one of the first police detectives, and really the complete inspiration she must have been to not have fear, to do the kinds of things that she was doing, and to show him that you can catch the bad guys and do good. And really how that was a thread throughout what he ended up doing with confirmation.com, which is so interesting. It's another twist to it, but also shows how deep our belief systems go and where they actually begin, and how we get inspired to do the things that we want to do. The other inspiration that he had was all of his family being entrepreneurs as well, and seeing the risks that they took and the wherewithal to make it through the ups and downs of business, especially through the types of business that they were in real estate and construction. But I've always thought, as an entrepreneur, and I think others that maybe aren't entrepreneurs look at people that do run businesses and are, thinking, how do they withstand it? How do they get up each morning when they got hit hard the day before? And this is really part of it. It is a way that you just have to be, because if you get too down by something going wrong, then that negativity can affect the entire business, and you kind of have to brush it off and move forward. And I think Brian's story talks so much about having that belief that you are doing the right thing, that there's a gut feeling that the business is right. And that is something that you can't teach. That is one of those things that you just have to feel it. And when you only have 30 days of cash, like he was saying for so long, and are willing to sell your car so that you can go another 30 days, it just shows you the wherewithal you have to have in believing that your business can succeed, or that it will grow, or it will do what it was intended to do. I think that more than anything is the definition of between a successful entrepreneur and a non-successful entrepreneur, because that positive mindset is so important. And if you're not someone that naturally has that mindset or belief system that you can take some hard hits and keep going, then you can do practices of gratitude practices each day, and trying to journal or note of the negative thoughts that might come into your mind, or the self-talk that is getting in your way of success. But it's often, I have found, in the pause where you have to step back from the business and actually think about, what can I do different? What's working? What's not working? And what should I do different tomorrow or the next day? And when you only have 30 days of cash, you can't plan out for 12 months and 24 months and 5 years. And I think Brian had said in this that was so important, that, there's a big difference between being an entrepreneur and going by your gut versus when you're in corporate and you spend a ton of time doing all this analysis and research and looking at things from all different directions of whether you should do it or not. As an entrepreneur, you don't have time to do all that analysis. You have to go by what you are seeing and being completely aware of how the business is being affected. And so if you push too hard against something that's not working, then it will get in your way of the business growing. But if you are aware of what's not working, but you believe in it, and you can get creative and pause and take those moments to work on the business and not in the business, to think about what are some other ways you could try to accomplish the same thing, that's when the play happens in the business. And that's the fun part of being an entrepreneur, and really trying to solve for, there's got to be a way. And if you believe it, that's one of those things. And one of his biggest learnings from his business mentor that he talked about was that positive cash flow is what creates happiness. And as an entrepreneur, another thing that happens is you get so distracted about all the different things that you could tap into. And each day there's a new opportunity that somebody calls about or sees, and you could do that, or you could do this. And his mentor really talking to him about not getting distracted. Like, where's your focus, and what do we have to do to get to positive cash flow before we can entertain those other possibilities? And that is also a big difference between a successful entrepreneur and a non-successful entrepreneur, is the distraction factor and knowing what you're trying to achieve. And for him, they were trying to win in bank confirmations, electronic bank confirmations, and they knew they had to achieve that before they could walk into other service lines. And so that is really, really important. And I think too, that bigger value system or mission of helping the good guys catch the bad guys, which was something from when he was little, of watching his mom, of playing with his brother in the woods to catch the bad guys, that actually became a mission of the business. And if they were aligned with that value system, they knew they were doing the right thing. And that's really, really important, is that when you're trying to make decisions in a business and decide which way you're going to go, it's really important to make sure that you have some value system you've defined, some mission that's beyond the money of what you're trying to accomplish. And if that decision aligns with that value system, that mission, then you know you're on the right path. And if it doesn't, that tells you you're not focused, you're going to get distracted and start moving away from what the purpose of your business was in the first place. So leaving you with some great nuggets here of really understanding your mission and being mission driven in your business, remembering to build a great team, because at the end of the day, you're only as good as your people. You can be the smartest person in the room, but if your people aren't happy, if they're not succeeding, if they're not understanding the mission and the value, you're going to have trouble moving the business forward. And then the other thing about being an entrepreneur, which I thought was really important, is that you need to do things that scare you, that you can't ever get too complacent or comfortable, because that's when someone gets ahead of you, that you always have to be thinking about what could I risk, what opportunities are out there that might scare me a little bit, but it's worth it for me to dive in, and not wait for the opportunity to present itself. That if you see the opportunity, to go after it, to get involved, and to never give up. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen to the Breaking Beliefs podcast. I hope you will take a moment to pause before entering back into your day to reflect on this podcast and note 1 to 2 actions you are inspired to do from today's conversation that you could incorporate into your life. To read the full blog and listen back to this episode or any other, you can find them at www.amyvetter.com/Breaking Beliefs podcast and related videos on my YouTube channel. For daily inspiration, follow me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn at Amy Vetter CPA. I hope that you will choose to like this and subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and more, so that you can join us for more inspiration on our next episode.